the session Data Analytics, Data-Driven Business Decision Making. Let us start this session with Introduction to Analytics in Business, Importance of Data Analytics in Business Strategy, Developing an Analytical Mindset, Types of Analytics, Descriptive, Diagnostic, Predictive and Prescriptive Analytics, Analytics Lifecycle and Decision Making Process, Application of Analytics in Business Functions, Data Management and Visualization, the Big Data, Ethical, Strategic and Future Trends in Analytics. Business organizations were busy in doing their business. They never worried about the data which was getting generated from their business processes and activities. Over a period of time, when this data got accumulated, it formed a big data. Now the managers were wondering what to do with this data. Looking at the data gave them some insights. The data which got accumulated created certain patterns, and the exhibitions, behaviors from the data were leading to certain insights in the business. Now managers had to look at not only the structured data, but there was also huge amount of unstructured data which was getting pooled due to the various business and marketing activities in the organizations. The process of looking at the data and analyzing led to the business analytics. Now this also evolved as data science. Now let us look into the formal definition of data analytics. Analytics is the discovery, interpretation and communication of meaningful patterns in data. Data analytics is the process of analyzing data to find patterns and trends, and then using those insights to make decisions. It's a multidisciplinary field that uses statistics, math and computer science to analyze large amounts of data. Now managers realize the data which was generated from the business transactions could be useful for multiple decision making dimensions. Now this data was not only getting accumulated in the market, it was also getting accumulated due to the internal transactions between the functional departments of the organization. It could be the production department where production activities were continuously happening, or it could also be the finance department where continuous finance decisions were made. Until a decade ago, not many managers worried about the data which was getting generated. The reports which were generated due to the exchange of information between the departments led to another field of analytics. Now over a period of time, managers understood the data was trying to say something to them. Now not all managers were equipped for this, but the data was evolving. Now that gave scope for multiple decision making aspects. Managers were empowered to make informed decisions. It started providing some insights to them. Now let us try to understand how important was it. The importance of data analytics. It helps the managers to find patterns. It helps them to make predictions, solve problems and help them making faster and better decisions. Now managers were able to look into the data, the historical data and make predictions like future. They were also able to predict what could be the possibilities based on the previous occurrences. Not only that, they were also able to understand few variations which could lead to efficient ways of doing business. So the whole organization, managers, employees, stakeholders, everybody were involved in the data generation exchange process. Now this required to develop an analytical mindset for managers, all employees, customers and all stakeholders connected to the business. They all were understanding the importance of data. Now this required them to develop an analytical mindset altogether. Managers were also supposed to own certain mathematical, statistical and research-oriented skills, because absorbing the data required an integration of all these skills, because Absorbing this data required them to understand and impart all these skills. So managers started using analytical skills with the help of data modeling techniques. Certain application softwares were designed and managers could learn that and start using analytical models to make better decisions. This also required them to develop communication skills because it was not sufficient only if they add the data observation skills. They also had to build reports and tell the data story or learn the storytelling techniques to tell what the data was trying to communicate. So they had to generate different types of reports. There were different types of structured, semi-structured and unstructured data which was being pulled from the websites, social media, stakeholders data, financial data, internal part of the organization as well as the external part of the organization. So the data was getting pulled from all angles. So just imagine when all this data was getting accumulated, how big the data could have been formed. So we moved from data to databases, from databases to big data, and that required data science techniques. So the managers were trained for the data analytical skills. There are 4 types of data modeling techniques. So the managers were supposed to understand these data analytical modeling techniques. Some of the major types of data analytical models are descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. Now let us understand all these different types of analytics. In descriptive analytics, they were looking at the historical data created by the company. Now this would tell them what were the previous occurrences and what it could lead in the future. So descriptive analytics was using data aggregation and data mining. That is putting together the data drilling, data slicing and certain techniques were used to understand what the data from the previous transactions generated was trying to communicate. Now, descriptive analytics also lets the business see what has already happened. It usually is the historical data through which managers were able to gain some insights. Now, this could be generated or visualized, like what we call it as data visualization. Now, this could be visualized with the help of dashboards and business intelligence systems. Now, descriptive data was more about what happened in the past. Now, diagnostic analytics was less focused on what has occurred but rather focused on why something happened. So, it would help the managers to brainstorm or deep dive and find out why something occurred. So, it was finding the answers for why some situations occurred or why this happened. So, it was more of diagnosing and scanning the reasons for occurrences. Now, with the help of the historical data, predictive analytics could predict or forecast what could be the possibility of occurrences in the near future. So, multiple patterns which existed in the previous could help them to find out what were the number of possibilities which could be like occurrence 1, occurrence 2 or possibilities. Predictive analytics was more about forecasting and this was done with the help of regressions, simulations or data mining techniques. Now, prescriptive analytics was more about telling the possibilities of variations or better prescribing what were the number of possibilities. Prescriptive analytics allows the managers to control what is being molded. Prescriptive analytics was suggesting decision options on how to take advantage of a future opportunity. Now, this was done with the help of optimization, decision trees, mathematical programming and heuristics models. When we look at all the 4 types of analytical models like descriptive, diagnostic, prescriptive and predictive models, managers were trying to touch the data from the past, present and the possibilities. Now, if you look at this diagram, we should be able to understand what were the various techniques which were used in all different analytical models. Now, everything from dashboards to mathematical models were used, and just now as we discussed, managers were supposed to understand mathematical models. They should also be having knowledge about the statistical, techniques and research orientation. Now, when we say this, it is clearly understood managers had to, upgrade themselves with all these skills. They had to cultivate a mindset to be more creative and fun, and they should be really interested in operating or applying certain analytical techniques with the help of statistical models. So it would not be enough for the managers to just do business. It was really important for them to apply, understand these analytical techniques. Now let us try to understand the analytics life cycle. The analytics life cycle and decision making process. It refers to a structured process of gathering, preparing, analyzing, interpreting and communicating the data to make informed decisions. Every organization now had to decide what was the need for building a data model or a business intelligence system which would help them to generate dashboards or generate certain visualizations which could help their managers in turn. So the organizations were supposed to have a clarity on what was the purpose of building a data model. And they could not do this by themselves. They had to take the help of IT organizations. So with all the information system components, there was a necessity of incorporating the data analytical skills. Now building a data model for every organization is a unique task. Every organization can choose the type of data model which is relevant to them. Now this became an extra task for the business organization, but they never worried about that. The reason is there were huge benefits by adopting such data analytical models. Now let us try to understand the life cycle of a data analytical model and the decision making process. The data analytics life cycle stages can be listed as identifying or discovering the need for data creation, data collection, data preparation, and then modeling of data like both model planning and building, and then data visualization and management, and helping towards the last stage of interpretation of data with the managers. Now let us quickly try to understand each of these stages. The first stage for every organization was to understand where to pull in the data from. Data was getting generated from the internal business systems as well as the external business environment. In last sessions, we understood that the external environment like political, economic, legal, social, technological, demographic data was important for business decision making. Now, the organizations had to pull in this data from the open sources or from the forums or from the government bodies or any other sources from where this data was available. But this data had to be reliable and validated. Now, that data was getting pulled from these sources what we just listed now. And internal records, they had already created business intelligence systems. So they just had to modify and upgrade incorporating these analytical techniques. Now once the data was collected and prepared, they were focusing on building the models. So data model planning and model building were the next stages. Now during this stage, a certain type of data modeling pertaining to the business requirement would be built. Now they used to use all different types of analytical models, like it could be helpful for predictive or prescriptive analytics. So during the data preparation stage, they would be focusing on cleaning the unwanted data, transforming and structuring the data to ensure the quality of data, and also consistently upgrade the data by handling missing values, outliers and duplicates. Now this only meant that the data what was coming in was useful for making informed decisions. So they had to ensure the data was relevant and consistent. Now based on the data collected, they were supposed to build the data models. So they would select an appropriate analytical technique, like it could be regression or classification or clustering, building predictive models based on the data. So during the model planning and building, They would select appropriate analytical techniques like regression, classification or clustering and build predictive models based on the data. Now this would help them assess the accuracy and performance of the built models using various metrics to ensure reliability. So once this was done, they were supposed to project the data. Now for this, they had to ensure data visualization and data analysis techniques. Now during the data visualization process, they would build models which would project the data in graphical formats or any other visual formats which would be easy for the managers to interpret. Now whatever the data was happening inside the business, now that data would be projected in terms of graphs or other formats. Now this could also be a video, a PDF file, a chart or any other multiple formats. There could also be an application of simulation model to check the possibilities of like what if analysis or variations or even something like cluster analysis or regressions. Now all these techniques would help them to visualize the data in different possibilities. So once the data model was built, the next stage or the final stage was about data management and evaluation. Now once the data analytical life cycle was completed, it only meant that there was a data model ready for an organization. They had to continuously look into this data model and understand whether the model was providing sufficient insights or helping managers to make the required decisions. So internally, they would apply a lot of machine learning techniques and algorithms to help this data modeling. Once the data model was ready, the managers would be equipped with an application or a tool with a software where they could just log in and use. Now all this would still be part of the information system components. It would only mean that they would touch the respective component. Like we had discussed, software, hardware, people, network and data resources. Now just because of the data modeling was happening, all of these resources were also integrated in the process of data modeling. Now let us look into the applications of data analytics in business. We have been discussing various functional areas of business. Though we have been discussing banking and healthcare systems as examples throughout our all chapters, right now we are trying to understand some of the common functional areas like marketing, finance, supply chain and HR. So in marketing analytics, it is useful for analyzing customers' data, or it could be about product data, sales data or anything which is relevant to the marketing activity. So there are certain techniques like churn analysis to understand the customer churn rate, or return on investment analysis, or customer relationship analysis. So there could be different techniques which could be applied to look at the marketing data. Now this was mostly useful for the marketing department. Similarly, the logistics department would rely on supply chain analytics. The logistic activity would generate a lot of data pertaining to the logistics, inventory and movements of goods. Now that would be helpful for demand forecasting or inventory optimization. In financial analytics, it would be helpful for risk analysis, fraud detection or profitability forecasting. In HR analytics, it could be something like workforce planning, employee engagement insights, employee training or employee retention techniques. So there were multiple possibilities of applying all these analytical models within the functional areas of management. Now to analyze any of these functional areas data, they could use some simple techniques with the help of data visualization like Tableau, Power BI, Python libraries, and all these are some of the simple applications where the managers need not have in-depth software knowledge but just learn some of the data loading and projecting techniques. Now that would help them create some actionable insights towards the business decisions. Now we have been talking about big data, and big data was the outcome of structured, semi-structured and unstructured data. When business activities were continuously occurring, Business organizations were already storing the data in the structured format, and they assumed it would only be databases with relationships, like what we call it as relational database. And then they moved on to the object oriented database, adding some functions into the data attributes. Now they had semi-structured and unstructured data, which was also getting pulled in. Oh, what is this unstructured data? The unstructured data could be anything which could be pulled out of social media activity, an email, a PDF file, a web blog, a video, or a simple set of observations which was just flowing in as a data. Now these data need not have particular structure, and hence they are called as unstructured data. Now all such structured, unstructured and semi-structured data was pooling in, and it was exceeding terabytes, which was growing exponentially, which led to big data. Some of the top technologies used to store and analyze big data are Hadoop, MapReduce, Apache, Pig, Hive, Zookeeper, MongoDB. Now the data which was generated was exceeding terabytes, petabytes and exabytes. Now the volume of data increased from the day-to-day business activity. The organizations today are challenged to store and analyze this data. The reason is the data is generated not only by the business activity but by all the interactions of business activities. It could be anything like data generated by various sources of business operations, social media networks, business informatics, search engines, organizational activities, etc. The managers who were analyzing this data started behaving like data scientists. Some of the attributes of data science are mathematical and statistics skills integrated together, and these data scientists were required to work with numbers and statistics, and also they were supposed to possess certain programming skills. They should also possess a bit of programming knowledge. They need not design the whole program, but at least modifying a bit of code or a part of code to make some variations. So the managers acted as data scientists and started incorporating all these techniques on the data. They had to understand the big data formats. Now it could be like a structured data like a database or an outcome of an ERP, or a data warehouse like where huge data is stored, which enables data mining possibilities, or it could also be the outcome of a customer relationship management package. Now unstructured data could be anything in form of a text file, images, audio video, emails, or it could be randomly generated data from the sensor data, websites, logs, etc. Semi-structured data could be anything from document format of different extension formats, like we can see JSON, CSV, XML formats. Electronic data interchange, that is from the business activities, or it could also be like unstructured data with NoSQL databases or with the help of a HTML page. Let us try to understand some of the characteristics of big data. The big data was of variety, like different forms of data. Some of the characteristics of the big data are volume, variety, velocity, veracity. Now the volume, because of the amount of data it was getting generated, it used to be huge. Variety, because different types of data was supported. Veracity is uncertainty on the flow of data. Now, this would be like certain at some times, and sometimes business activities could be unpredictable and there could be sudden rush of data. Now the systems like information systems were supposed to be ready to pull in this data, and this also would throw multiple challenges to the managers to understand why was this occurring, and this is where the diagnostic analytics would be useful. Velocity, which refer to the processing speed, which included the rate of change in linking the incoming data sets at varying speeds, since there used to be continuous business activities. Now how this data needs to be stored would be one of the challenges to the managers. Now these were some of the characteristics of big data. Today, big data is being integrated with the help of machine learning. Now, a lot of machine learning techniques have been incorporated to big data, and data is being trained, which means that the data is being deep dived, dissected and understood why is it behaving so. So big data has been continuously evolving and getting integrated with artificial intelligence, machine learning and other modern techniques. With all this occurrings, it was also a concern for the managers to worry about the ethical, strategic and the future trends of data analytics. Now when we consider the ethical points of data analytics, we were touching the core part of data. So this data belonged to multiple users. So organizations were supposed to have some norms, or government should have set some norms when the data was collected from somebody. Now this somebody could be a person, an object or an organization. Let us say the information pertaining to product or a country or a zone. Now whom do we take permission to collect the data about these attributes? Let us look into some of the ethical dimensions of data analytics. Data privacy and ethical considerations like taking the permissions from the concerned party before collecting the data would be most important. Achieving data transparency by clearly communicating how data is collected, used and analyzed was most important to build trust with others. Similarly, data governance framework was supposed to be established with respect to data collection, storage and usage of ethical and compliant data practices. The strategic and future trends of data analytics was more concerned about the evolving techniques like AI and machine learning integration, utilizing advanced algorithms to generate predictive insights, automate the tasks and uncover the complex patterns in data. Explainable AI, which is called as XAI, was helpful in developing AI models that could clearly explain the reasoning and decision-making processes to enhance trust and transparency. Data literacy, fostering a culture where all employees were equipped with skills to understand and interpret data effectively. Now, there was a huge preparation when data analytics started occurring. Today, most of the organizations are using data analytical models in smaller or larger techniques. So we can conclude that data analytics has been helpful for managers to gain insights and make informed decisions. Let us now look into some of the interesting facts. These were some of the references used for this session discussion. Thank you.